The Pluralism Garden, Aga Khan Garden by Suzanne Nihad. The word paradise is known as the kingdom of heaven or the promised land in English and many languages. Meanwhile, the word garden refers to a small piece of ground used to grow plants. In the Holy Quran, the word Jannah refers to both heavenly paradise and earthly gardens. Thus, the garden is a symbol for paradise. The use of the same word to describe gardens in heaven and on earth was not only applied in the language of the Quran, it was also represented in gardens design during Muslim civilizations. Some of the elements mentioned in the Quran to describe paradise were essentials. For example, some components of the Islamic gardens are gushing water, shades, and rivers. Usually, these gardens will reflect the four rivers in paradise: milk, wine, and purified honey. Moreover, the gardens were divided to different sections and levels, referring to different degrees and rewards in paradise. D. Ruggles, in her book Islamic Gardens and Landscapes, stated that Western admirers have long seen the Islamic gardens as an earthly reflection of the paradise said to await the faithful. Islamic gardens are symbolism to paradise, not an embodiment. Muslims don't demonstrate an exact image of paradise, since they believe in it with imaginary expectations. The abstract in Islamic gardens reflects the indirect metaphor to paradise, believing in the unseen and disbelieving in the direct imaging of God's creations. The forms in Islamic gardens not only follow function, they also follow faith. The compositions will evolve into a deeper and more meaningful design, demonstrating beliefs and Islamic values. A contemporary Islamic garden is implementing different eras and cultures into a new era and culture. This concept was accomplished in the Aga Khan garden designed by Thomas Waltz, using the common famous shapes in Islamic gardens called the quartered garden, Persian Chahar Bagh, or four gardens. In other words, they were divided by means of four water channels. Thomas Waltz of Nelson Bard Waltz Landscape Architects visited Islamic gardens in Egypt and India to come up with an Islamic garden for the 21st century in Edmonton, North Alberta. That trip is what helped us avoid the sense we were making some historical quotations without a deeper understanding of space, form, scale, and what the garden would be made of. The layouts and elements in the design are so engaging, enabling individuals' interpretations based on the viewer's cultural background and faith, as visitors will build their own image of the unseen. A central gushing river or flowing river is recalling the Quranic expression of Al-Kawthar, a river in paradise. Footsteps above the river are citing the image of river flowing underneath their feet. Walking to the garden through the pathway is recalling the straight path, as-Sirat al-Mustaqim. In conclusion, although thorough analyzation and contemplation represent pluralism by tolerating cultures and linking eras and civilizations, furthermore, it is connecting contemporary design with traditions and integrating heavenly paradise and earthly garden. As a result, the outcome was not simply a garden, but Jannah. Articles review by Academia.
Today's episode is going to take us somewhere extraordinary. Not physically, I'm still just talking into a mic. But mentally extraordinary. We're diving into a paper by Susan Nihad, focused on something called the Pluralism Garden, also known as the Aga Khan Garden. So, what's the big question at the centre of Susan's work? Basically, she's looking at how gardens, specifically Islamic gardens, can act as symbols of paradise. I know gardens might sound simple at first, like, great, I mow the lawn once a week, is that symbolic? But in this context, Islamic gardens are so much more. The central problem the paper explores is this deep, almost poetic relationship between the physical garden spaces on Earth and the idea of paradise in religious belief, especially how those ideas are translated into actual garden design. Why does this matter, you might be thinking? Well, Time and again, we see that the spaces around us shape our thoughts, our peace of mind, even our sense of belonging in a world that's frankly fractured by cultural divides. Thinking about how physical spaces can embody pluralism and connect diverse traditions feels pretty important. If you're someone who enjoys parks or visiting gardens, or maybe you just find spiritual ideas interesting, this study is a way to think deeper about the landscapes you encounter every day. Now, let me break down Susan's main findings and arguments. Again, I'm just reporting her claims, not vouching for them. One of the coolest points is around the word paradise. In English and many languages, paradise conjures this image of the promised land, heaven, perfection. But in the Holy Quran, the word Jannah is kinda interesting. It refers to both heavenly paradise and earthly gardens. Susan argues that this dual meaning actually changed how people designed their gardens, especially across Muslim civilizations. You end up with landscapes that are not just pretty, but absolutely loaded with meaning. And get this, these gardens didn't try to literally copy heaven, they were more like poetic metaphors. Muslims historically built gardens that symbolise paradise by using flowing water, shaded paths, and dividing the space into sections or levels, sometimes 4 rivers, meant to evoke paradise as described in sacred texts. But nobody claims these places are actual paradise. They're more of an expression of belief and hope, a pointer towards something unseen, rather than its recreation. It's sort of like, you know, when you stand under a flowering tree and sunlight comes through the leaves and you think, wow, if I could bottle this feeling, that would be bliss. That's kind of the ballpark, except a lot more intentional. To bring it into modern times, Susan highlights the Aga Khan Garden in Alberta, Canada. Designed by Thomas Waltz, this isn't just a throwback to old designs. It's like, yeah, a remix. Waltz actually travelled to historic gardens in places like Egypt and India to get inspiration and avoid making just a copy without spirit. His team used a pattern called the quartered garden, derived from Persian designs, meaning 4 parts separated by water channels. But here's where it gets wild. The ways people interact with this space are supposed to let their own cultural backgrounds and beliefs play a part. So as you walk the garden, seeing a central river, Susan connects this to the Quranic river Al-Kawthar, a river in paradise, or stepping over water channels, or following straight pathways meant to evoke the straight path. It's your own lived experience and background, interpreting what you see and feel. The whole garden becomes a shared but individually meaningful experience. It's a celebration of pluralism. And, honestly, if there's any lesson at all, it's that integrating history, spiritual ideas, and new designs can make our common spaces richer. You don't have to know the symbolism to sense the magic, but if you do, maybe it opens up the possibility of, I don't know, tiny moments of transcendence as you wander a public garden. I'm digressing now, but have you ever noticed how sometimes you sit in a park and every sound seems heightened? Like suddenly you care about birds more than you did 5 minutes ago? It's wild how space can do that. So, to wrap up, what does the paper actually mean for you? Well, it nudges you to look at your environment with fresh eyes. There's more to every path and pool of water than meets the eye. Literally, there can be centuries of thought folded into the patterns you walk through. Susan's work reminds us that research is a tool for sparking reflection, not a final answer, but a way to ask new questions about the world around us. Thanks for joining me on In Depth with Academia. Remember, all of this is presented neutrally, no endorsement either way, so take what's interesting to you and keep exploring. Until next time, keep noticing, keep questioning, and maybe take a stroll through a garden with all this in mind.